I'm tired of men being afraid to be themselves. I'm tired of them being shamed. That's not masculine enough. You're a predator, etc. I'd rather choose the bear. I'm so tired of it. And I think we all know why and where it comes from. It's coming from us. It's coming from the people who should be your biggest supporters. We're the ones, putting you in this box. I'm tired of it. Today, we're going to read about a man discovering his box of limitations, etc. Because we are starting the chapter, Why is He Afraid to Be Different? In the book from 1958, The Decline of the American Male. Hi, welcome back to Far From Eden. We've been digging into this book. This is episode 5 of this book, and it's a first edition, first printing, because I don't trust the overlords not to change stuff, as we know that they do. We're fully in 1984 territory. But this chapter is Why is He Afraid to Be Different? And the reason I know, it's because I don't read ahead, but I just glanced at the beginning, and it is a personal story, which I think is even better. Like, let's take a closer look. So often we pull out and we take the macro look, right, at men. And I think hearing a man's story that these authors, it's written by 3 different people, each chapter, a different man writing it, I think it really draws us in closer to see what the experience is. And these authors obviously thought this story is relevant to the decline of the American male. So let's get right into it. Why is He Afraid to Be Different? By George B. Leonard Jr. One dark morning this winter, Gary Gray awakened and realized he had forgotten how to say the word I. For a brief instant, he was struck with terror. Then he forced himself to speak silently, moving his lips in the pre-dawn dimness. I'm going to get up. I'm going to have breakfast. I'm going to catch the train to work. But though he could say the word, its force and meaning were gone. Sounds like he's losing himself. Does that sound familiar? 1958. But though he could say the word, its force and meaning were gone. It was so much more reassuring and meaningful to say, we're going to confer at 10 this morning. We're going to initiate our expansion program. We're going to meet at the lodge tonight. Gary lay in suspenseful stillness. He felt the pleasing warmth of the electric blanket. He thought of the clock ticking away on the thermostat in the hall. In half an hour, it would turn on the furnace, and he would rise to a tasty and nourishing breakfast. The problems of his life were pretty well taken care of. Disregarding accidents or national catastrophe, he could look forward to good food, entertainment, a larger house, a larger car. He could send his children, David and Sharon, through school and college and help them grow up to be successful adults. Send Sharon to college to be a successful adult? 1958? Interesting. Are we going to raise them to be people who will make a good and successful family? Or are we raising them to be a cog in the system? And are we believing that that's a good thing to do? And why do we? Gary thinks he's doing the right thing. But as we were talking about the bigger house, the car, etc., I'm like, we talked about 1984 a few seconds ago. Now it's Brave New World. Bread and circus. Yet he was not really happy. He passed his days and nights not in the bright glow of personal conviction, but under the vague gray shadow of uneasiness and doubt. For a long time, he had wondered why. Now his moment of pre-dawn insight had given him a clue. He had lost his individuality. In the free and democratic United States of America, he had been subtly robbed of a heritage that the communist countries deny by force. In 1958, he realized, hey, they're doing it to us too. They're just doing it in a different way. That's so profound. When had the theft started? Gary thought back to World War II, when he, with hundreds of others, had been compelled to ride in trucks like cattle and stand naked in long lines waiting for mass physical examinations. They're just used, men are just used, disposed of. Here, go off to war. Go over here to this other continent and go off to war, because if you don't, we'll all be speaking German soon. Compelled to ride in trucks like cattle and stand naked in long lines because they don't value you. You're disposable. Go fight the bankers' wars. But this was not when it started. Coercion in the army was too obvious, too open. You followed orders, but your inner self held to its privacy. Now he had no private inner self. Who had taken it? Who was the enemy? His ancestors, who had come early to America, fought tyrants and Indians. They were surrounded by danger, but they could see their enemies. Their enemies had names. The enemy who had robbed Gary had neither name nor face. An incident yesterday afternoon had started him thinking. He had been standing on a curb waiting for a traffic light to change when an anonymous voice had come from a loudspeaker which he could not see. Man in the blue suit, step back on the curb until the light has changed. Automatically, as if by reflex action, Gary had started to step back. Then he had realized that he was not wearing a blue suit, nor was he standing off the curb. But in truth, the nameless voice had not been meant just for any single me. It had been meant for us, for all within hearing. Its intent was good. Are you sure? It was safety education, designed to encourage lawful behavior by publicly shaming erring individuals. However, it would also accustom individuals to faceless authority. It would condition their reflexes to obey any voice coming from any loudspeaker, maybe even loudspeakers like those in the public squares of Russia and China. Yes, exactly. And it's all in the name of safety. Who remembers 2020? It's always in the name of safety and the greater good. And it doesn't look like the communism. So many people have commented on my channel and said, there's not communism here. It's not going to look like it looked like in Russia or in China. It's going to be covert because they know you can't do that to Americans. But you can trick us. And what they want to do is tear men down, because men are the ones who would stand against it. And they need the men to fight their wars and make money and pay taxes. They just use you, and they use the women to help. But who was he to question the use of loudspeakers at busy intersections? In the complex modern world, maybe it was necessary to exert rigid control, more every year, on individual actions. And if he complained, then what? He would be called maladjusted. That was the group's incontestable judgment upon any individual who dared to resist. Here was something new and insidious in American life, an unspoken assumption that the group was always right. We think this is all new. Everybody's like, oh, this is so new. Everybody's woke, so new, blah, blah, blah. No. I think there was a serious change at least the middle of the 20th century towards this stuff. Think about this. In World War II, we fought Japan, who was fighting China, a communist country. We aligned ourselves with Russia, another communist country. Just saying. The company where Gary worked as a junior executive certainly was no place for individuality. There, teamwork and personnel relations reigned over all. This meant you had to like everyone, give careful consideration to every proposal, no matter how trivial, handle every employee with the velvet gloves of insincerity. It meant you spent more than half of your time in conferences or committee meetings. It meant you put aside personal convictions and developed instead a personal radar, sensitive to the moods of others who made up the group. Everyone ended up groping for the right way, the group way, while phony politeness and synthetic good intentions resounded through the corridors. You guys have all done those trainings where they make you sit there all day and watch those videos on how to be kind to certain different groups and how to, know the right pronouns and stuff like that. It's not any different. This is the same. It's just different groups. They have been shackling you for a long time, and they do it a little bit at a time. They tighten and tighten and tighten those shackles. Your cell gets smaller and smaller and smaller, but they hide the bars so you don't know. But I think finally people are waking up and they're starting to say, men are waking up and starting to say, this society hates me. Everybody uses me. But it's been going on a lot longer than you think. So if you're over there like doubting whether or not that's true, or if you're making too big of a deal or whatever, no, you're not. It's real. It's real. Here we go. Here's a false thing that so many people believe when they're working for a company. This is just a lie that they continuously push. And yet, thought Gary, the company seemed genuinely interested in the innermost workings of each employee's personality. Actually, they seemed fascinated. They had probed into his inner self like scientists studying a beetle. It's not because they care. It's how to use you best. At first, he had been impressed by the battery of tests given him when he had come to apply for his job. This use of the scientific method in job placement had seemed progressive, and he had known how to answer. They're already training you to be their slave. Do you daydream frequently? Of course he daydreamed. Most of the great advances of the human race, including new ideas for American business, had sprung from daydreams, but he had answered no. Even then, his radar had been working. The company wanted men who would not admit they daydreamed. By realizing the right answer was no, Gary had shown his ability to sense the mold of conformity. By answering no, he had shown his willingness to compromise his inner self and fit into the mold. And the fact that that was expected of him, let's ask ourselves this question right now. Why do you have that job? He said earlier, they can afford the house, the car, send the kids to college. Who's demanding the bigger house? Who's demanding the cars? We learned in the first chapter, we already knew it, The woman. The wife is putting that pressure on him to have that job. So he, has to compromise himself, his whole self, his own convictions, his daydreams. It's not, hey, what would you like to do? What makes you happy? What do you want? It doesn't matter. No one cares about Gary. Least of all, his wife, which is the invisible thing here. The corporation can take advantage of him because the wife is pushing him to be this junior executive. He can't walk away. He can't say, no, I'm not going to be here if I can't be myself and I can't have my convictions and I can't say I daydream. I'm not going to be here if I'm going to lose myself. Do you know how many men got that mandated procedure that came from the 2020 thing? Because they couldn't lose their jobs. I talked to a pharmacist at my local pharmacy, and I don't know how he got into it, but I try to talk to men when I saw he was down. And we were talking about, we got to that certain mandated procedure thing, and he said he had to get it or he'd be let go. He worked for CVS. And I said, you had to get it? He said, I have a family. That means I know if I don't get it and I get fired from this job, I'll lose my family. So many men, they looked at it like I don't have a choice. And this reminds me of that. Because who's driving him to have to be there? To lose himself. For what? For what? But this was not the worst of it. After 3 years with the company, just before being promoted and transferred from Chicago to the West. So yeah, just leave your parents and whatever, extended family you have. For what? For more money, to stay with the company. Drag your kids across the country away from what they know. This is not good for them. This is not good for your family. But who cares? That's not the most important thing. A bigger house and more cars, all that stuff, that's what's important. He had been subjected to an ordeal that was becoming familiar to thousands of Americans. It started with the Rorschach test, in which he was asked to look for images in a series of ink blots. With the Rorschach test, it was difficult, if not impossible, to sense the right answers. Though his buddies who had already been through the test told him it was all right to see kind of hanky-panky symbols, but it was very soon apparent that the psychologist sitting across from him was not to be satisfied with vague symbols. His professional curiosity recognized no barriers of privacy, and for the better part of 3 afternoons, Gary heard himself revealing details about his ways of living that he had considered secret and somewhat sacred. And remember, in the last chapter, we read how some of these bosses, when they're, thinking about employing a man, they would interview the wives because they know who's driving all this. Good Lord. Men are being squeezed. I've said that. They're being squeezed between the state and their wives. And you say, well, what about the company? Well, working for the company, being able to afford the house, the car, this, that, well, your property taxes are going to be higher. You're certainly going to pay more income tax. And you become a slave to the system. You're pushed by the woman to do it. You're squeezed by the company. No wonder you guys feel like this. Oh, goodness gracious, I lost my spot. He must have done all right, for he got his promotion. Yeah, you get to be a hire slave now. But why had he allowed this grape of his privacy and integrity? And how was the company privileged to pry into his hanky-panky life, his private bedroom fun life? The answer was obvious. The group was always right. I feel like I'm reading 1984 right now. The individual had its single duty: adjust. And if he had difficulty adjusting, modern science was there to help him. Science, particularly psychology, provided frighteningly efficient techniques for increasing the power of the group over the individual. I can't believe what I'm reading right now. The company used some of these techniques on customers as well as on employees. Gary knew that several university psychologists had been hired to study hidden weaknesses and prejudices in typical consumers. These studies resulted not in better products, but in new packages, which bore unsuspected messages to the subconscious. Yep, propaganda and everything. Why, he wondered, had the university psychologists surrendered their years of training and their professional integrity to such a purpose? Maybe they too had already lost their respect for individuals and viewed them only as specimens to be analyzed and manipulated. I think it's because the values changed and money became God. Money became God. That was what we all strive for, keeping up with the Joneses. And I mean, men did it too. They wanted to show off too, because they were told that's what makes you successful. That's what makes you a real man. No, it isn't. No, it isn't. Being a slave to your company or to your wife or to the government is not what defines you as a man. But they're going to tell you it is, because then they get what they want. Maybe they too were men who had forgotten the meaning of I. Many universities, no less than corporations, were becoming faceless groups resembling nothing so much as vast military training camps. It's not new. It's not new. These indoctrination centers, turning the youth into giving them a more communist group mindset. It's not new. Was it the purpose all along? They'll never tell us. Now Gary was becoming angry. The group was always right, even little things, petty annoyances. The new cars on the commuter trains, for example, their seats were so close together that his knees were constantly bumping. But the cars had been designed for the mass, not the individual. There would probably be charts to show the economies of the situation. The group was always right. And Gary thought of what happened when he called a busy telephone switchboard and was told, "1 moment, please." The moment often lengthened to a minute and a half. Oh my gosh, a minute and a half. But for them, rude. The moment often lengthened to a minute and a half. By accident? Not at all. Studies had shown that most people would wait that long before hanging up. Staffs for reservations, complaints, or other business services were gearing accordingly. Look at customer service today. There is none. How about the thousands whose patience was stretched precisely to the breaking point? Well, they were mere individuals, and service was geared for groups. The group was always right. Though corporations loomed large in Gary's life, and let's just take a second to realize that in 1958, corporations were pretty new. It wasn't that long ago that the United States had been fairly agrarian for the most part. Sure, there were factories and cities and stuff like that, but because of mass media, television, and grocery stores, the propaganda and the advertising and all of this, it just bloomed. That's a bad term because that sounds positive. Took over and started to control men especially. The unions he had worked with were as bad, if not worse, in effect. They actually discouraged their members from excelling one another. Gary visualized an entire nation directed by the interaction of vast pressure groups. There were groups for management and for labor, for doctors and for teachers, for farmers and for veterans, organized groups taking over. Right. Control, control. Keep tightening it. Keep tightening it on you, men, and giving you very little option to say no. But there was still something saved, Gary thought. After he left work, got off the commuter train, walked into his house, closed the door, then surely he had privacy and sanctuary. Or had he? He turned to look at Martha. She was sleeping on her stomach, her cheek pressed childlike against the sheet. Why is she sleeping? He just got home from busting his rear end. Why is he getting home and she's sleeping? He loved her. They were happily married. But if anything did go wrong, there was a welter of psychological advice readily at hand. Excuse me, little miss. That's Lola. She reminds me to remind you guys to hit that like button if you're enjoying the content, if you appreciate it. Share the show with your favorite feminist who think that men are privileged, or a man that needs to hear it so that he knows that he's not out of his mind to think that the society's against him. All right, so Martha's asleep. Okay, welter of psychologist advice readily at hand. As it was, experts told you how to furnish your house and how to eat, how to spend your leisure time, and how to bring up your baby. If that was not enough, they offered ready-made, standardized techniques for lovemaking. Well, they're just going to tell you how to do everything, aren't they? Because people haven't been doing it for thousands of years with the family as the bedrock of society in Western culture. No, we got to tell you how to do all of it because it's all been done wrong. I mean, the Bible sets out a lot of, excuse me. She's got my notebook. One word lay hidden beneath all the advice. It was adjust. Hold on just 1 second. We gotta take a pause. Okay. Hopefully we won't have any more interruptions. He turned away full of regret. Technique and adjustment were not the answers. How could any number of skillfully mastered tricks or any amount of well-meaning adjustment lead to real love when he couldn't say I? When he had lost the meaning of I, he had also lost the other two words, love and you. He recalled the day he and Martha first drove to Park Meadows. They had decided upon a rental, since their stay at the company's Western headquarters would not be permanent. And Park Meadows, with its imposing tower apartments and its gracefully landscaped patio homes, definitely offered a great deal of value for the money. But from the beginning, there was about the place an aura of faceless authority. The central administration building, the uniformed attendants, the neatly clipped grass, the scattered children sitting on the concrete walks. Oh. Oops. Aren't the children allowed to play on the grass? Martha asked. The conservatively dressed guide smiled proudly. No, you see, we have a large playground. We have supervised play. But Park Meadows was irresistible. Martha stood in the center of the kitchen of the 3-bedroom home, enchanted as a child on Christmas morning, as she surveyed the gleaming array of gadgets around her. As soon as they moved in, the Grays found out that friendships at Park Meadows, like the kitchen gadgets, were ready-made and automatic. Everything's shallow, everything's superficial, everything is driven towards, wealth and pleasure and ease. Automatically, you were included in the babysitting pool, the canasta club, the cafe clutches, I don't know what that means, of those neighbors whose houses opened onto the same patio as yours. In return, you were required to be friendly and outgoing to fit in. This is a peculiar assumption. Yeah, you've got to accept everybody, regardless of what their lifestyle is. You've got to get along to go along. So you can't have convictions. You can't say, oh, I don't know that I want my kids to play over there. I'm not sure I like the influences. You can't say that because the group is always right. It's so covert. So covert. Oh my gosh. All right. This was a peculiar assumption, Gary reflected, that friendships were interchangeable. They were cultivated not by admiration and mutual tastes, but by physical proximity. Right, it's forced, just like kids in school. That's not natural socialization. You should be around your family and families you've known for your whole life, and that creates your community. And then you have your like-minded, you share a culture, your kids grow up with familiar faces and good morals and values. But when they rip you to the other side of the country, all to chase, things that are shiny, that gets destroyed. We didn't see that, how that destructs the family. I saw it in my own life. I didn't see it when I was little because you're little and you don't know. But we moved all the time for my dad's job. So I didn't learn how to, I kept in touch with people, but it's easy for me to detach. And I hate saying that. I hate that. But I didn't grow up around any grandparents, any cousins, and we were constantly moving every few years. Why? Job? It was at the expense of our family. And I believe it destroyed us. But I believe that my father was doing what he thought was right. As Gary here. But I also realize now that my father probably over the years just felt like a working mule for everybody. Because you're the successful one in the family. Everybody's like, hey, pay for this, do this, do this. And it feels good to help your family and everything. But you lose yourself. What did he want? I have no idea what he wanted. Because no one cared. No one cared. It took me a long time to get to these realizations, to reflect on my own childhood and see how this type of thing destroys the family. It puts stress and it rips you away from what you're familiar with. And the thing it's not just what you're being ripped away from, but it's what you're told to go towards. And it's not good for us. It's like a good analogy would be, oh, go for this and you'll have a bigger house and this. It's like saying, oh, candy tastes good. I think I'll have it for every meal. That's not good for you. Neither is chasing bigger houses and bigger bank accounts and more extravagant vacations. If you're on a beach, how do you know? What's the difference? It's ridiculous, but this is all pumped into us that this is what we should want. This is what we should worship. Seek pleasure all the time. Struggle is wrong. And they protected their kids from it. He knew this was generally the case, not only at Park Meadows, but at most of the housing developments that were becoming a significant pattern in American community living. And isn't that going on more and more? What do you think they're going to build in California where everything burned down? Actually, how could it be otherwise? People were being shaped by what they would consume, what they would buy, eat, see on television. Since the products for consumption were remarkably standardized, then distributed in the mass, it was little wonder that everyone talked the same language. We thought this all started with social media? No. They were starting it right away with the media that they had. Movies and television was never good for us. It was always a tool to propagandize the masses. They just do it very covertly here in the West. had the further effect of segregating people by their ability to pay, their ability to consume, lacking the unalterable I. A mass housing development such as Park Meadows was sure to become just one more faceless group, a stage setting for the assembly line dinner party, the mass-produced smile, the interchangeable friend. Here, no less than in the company, reminds me of in 1984 when he calls it the party. The personal radar was an essential piece of equipment. Gary and Martha had driven from Chicago in an impressive but somewhat outdated convertible, which they had bought at a bargain from Martha's uncle. They had not been long at Park Meadows when both of them began getting blips on their radars, indicating that the convertible was not right for them at their present station of life. As soon as it was financially feasible, actually a little sooner, of course. Gary traded the old car in for a new station wagon. With the car, he knew he was trading in another portion of his individuality. But life was pleasant in a negative way at Park Meadows, right? Because it's not deep. It has nothing to do with your soul. It's outside your soul. And that's always going to feel wrong, whether you believe you have a soul or not. There were few squabbles. Neighbors got along. Those who were withdrawn were drawn out. Those who were grouchy were battered into submission by social cheerfulness. Have fun and the group, or else. Exactly, or else. Everybody's treating you like work mules. Everybody wants something for you, and they don't care what you want, and they don't care what you feel, and they don't care what you think. They'll strip you down naked and evaluate you and send you off to some war. They'll put you in a company and strangle you with needing to be nice to everybody and everything and need to get along to go along and having no convictions of your own. And how long does that go on until you, like he said, he forgot how to say the word I? Pretty soon you forget you have convictions. You tell yourself convictions are wrong. You're going to listen to your wife. You're going to listen to the company. Wife, company, wife, company. And all along, the state says, you're a good American. Or, insert your Western country. If you feel like the world hates you, if you feel like the world uses you, you're right. And it is wrong. And that's why I'm calling it out. And that's why I'm getting to the root of it. I want to show you guys that you're right when you feel that way and when you think those things. I want you to know where it comes from and how long it's been going on so you can understand your fathers and your grandfathers and your great-grandfathers. And not only that, your mothers, your grandmothers, and your great-grandmothers. Because they are a huge part of this. Where are the women saying, honey, if you're not happy at your job, what do you want to do? What would make you happy? Do you want to move out west or would you rather stay here? We'll find something else. I can, make beans and cornbread and I can make it stretch. I don't mind living in a smaller place. Where are the wives that say, honey, I can see that you're struggling? A good wife would see that Gary was struggling. A good wife would see that Gary was losing himself. He got home and his wife was sleeping. And he stood there and thought that he loved her. Men will sacrifice themselves and sacrifice themselves. And I'm tired of it being taken advantage of because it's a beautiful thing what men do. But it is precious and you don't take advantage of it. As a woman, we should protect that. And we should say, honey, I don't want you to have to, compromise your morals, your values, your convictions. And I don't want to see you so stressed about your job and feeling like you need to be fake. How is she not in tune with her husband? Martha? Get it together, Martha. Because she doesn't care. She doesn't care. She's completely oblivious. She likes her new gadgets and her new kitchen. Does she miss her family that she left behind? Is she worried about her children who now have to adjust to a brand new place? Do you know what it's like to be the new kid in school? It's awful. Anyway, I could rant on this forever. It's terrible. The first thing we need to do is recognize that it's happening and recognize for how long it's been happening. Bless you. Oh my goodness. Anyways, this is why you must protect your peace. You must feed your soul. It's not going to come from your company. It's certainly not going to come from the women. And it's not going to come from the state. It's got to come from here. And my belief is it's from God. I'm not saying religion. I'm not saying man up and get married. No. That's baloney. The church has been infested. I'm saying Bible, Jesus. There you go. Not the church, because they also hate men. So they shame you and they put you in a box too, because they have been infiltrated. So I will never, I don't support that at all. I don't go to church myself. So you know what? They don't care about you. They don't want you. MGTOW. MGTOW from all of it. All of it. You know? Protect your peace. Feed your soul. I love you guys. I'll see you on the next one. Bye.